Welcome everybody to our third Montessori Europe webinar, in which we are going to focus on the adult. Welcome all the faces that that have joined us in the past past two sessions, but it is also lovely to see some new names and people who I hope will engage with the conversation and will benefit from the conversation. Today we have got again Andrea Luka helping us to set the tone of the session, set the tone of the conversation, and to provoke some other thoughts about the role of the adult. This is really the hardest job for us all because it requires ongoing reflection and ongoing learning for all of us, irrespective of how much experience we have had in the classroom. We are very privileged not only to have Andy to guide us, but we also have Hannah Baynham and Heidi van Staden, both of whom participated in the adult panel discussion during Montessori Everywhere event on the 30th of August. So this promises to be an exciting session. Over to you, Andy.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I'm really excited about this one because I am all about the spiritual preparation of the teacher. This is my thing. This is what I love. And so I want to explain a little bit my story with this, though, because my ideas about the preparation of the teacher, of the adult, I should say, because this is about all adults, it's not just about teachers. But my ideas about the preparation of the adult begin with my grandmother. My grandmother, who in rural Mexico worked with orphans and children of very low economic means, and who did that even though, women of her status weren't supposed to do that. She passed that on to my mother. And my mother, who is sitting here, a lot of you already know her, went into Montessori and studied under a woman named Nan Hanrath. Now, Nan had some very different ideas about the preparation of the adult from the Montessori establishment. And Nan came into some problems with that, but she was still the AMI trainer in Mexico at the time. And what Nan believed was that everything comes back to the way the adult sees ourselves, the child, and the world. Everything. And so Nan's training program started with studies in culture, in geography, in philosophy, in dream analysis, in creative movement. All of these things happened during the first year of training because the training was 2 years long. And so even before Nan would let you think about Montessori, she already had you exploring these big ideas. When I took the TIES program, I found that Phil and Marcia took a very similar approach. And hopefully you all watched that video and you saw Phil talk about the TIES program. What Phil and Marcia did was literally do what Dr. Montessori said to do for the child. They give us the universe. They literally start with cosmology. They literally start with, this is the universe. This is how the universe functions. This is chaos. This is creation. This is expansion. This is the void and the emptiness that creates the stars from which we are all made. And so what I learned from my mother's lineage and what I learned from Phil and Marcia is that it is crucial for the adult to understand our place, how we are connected to the everything. And that's really hard. That's really hard. And it's especially hard because, as we talked about in the very first session here, most of us were not raised in this way. You know, I had a bit of a head start because I had these wonderful mentors, but most of us were not raised this way. Most of us were raised in schools and families where things were done in a particular way because that's just how they were done. We were not taught to question things. We were not taught to use our voices. We were taught to look at the world in compartmentalized buckets. This is science. And even science, this is biology, this is chemistry, this is physics, this is math, this is language, this is geography. And so when we step into a Montessori environment where we have to start seeing all of those as being one big piece of knowledge, it can be really tricky. And I believe that what happens when we start by looking at our role in the universe story, it really gives us a perspective that allows us to see all of these things as part of one whole. So the adult panel was unbelievably moving for me. Heidi, Hannah, you were brilliant. And Phil and Cindy were so inspiring. And I think I cried several times over the course of the recording. And then again, while editing it, because I found so many of your insights so profound. So before I get into the questions, I wanted to ask the two of you, Heidi and Hannah, if you had a couple of words that you wanted to share about your own experience of being on that panel and what came out of it for you. Either one of you can go first. You can pick.
Hannah, you can start.
Okay. Thank you, Heidi. Wow, it was just an amazing experience to be on the panel. People like Philip Gang, who I'd admired from afar and read a lot about, to speak to him was amazing. But to me, the real highlight was Dr. Cindy Acker. I really loved hearing her experience and actually keep reflecting on that idea of, yes, I understand not everyone has access to education in the same way, but to not even have that support of understanding which way to go, and how her journey through higher education was such a challenge because she wasn't supported in that supported as an adult in her learning. It really has kind of helped me think about what it means to really have privilege and to really have access to education, and to really, I want to make sure that every child has those same opportunities and never feels that they're left behind, and that every teacher also has that same access. And if they don't have that access, we need to challenge. It's our responsibility, it's our duty to do something about it. And so, yeah, Dr. Cindy Acker's words really resonated with me a lot. It was lovely to hear her explain and share her experience. But I really felt it was a call to action as well. So that was my.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Heidi?
I think that my what I took from the panel was about the sort of, it's almost that thread that you pull through from child through adolescence through to adult, and how the difference we can make as the adults in the classroom, that every interaction we have with children has an impact, and every impact that we have creates that man to be. And so at every plane of development, we need those really special adults who have specially spiritually prepared to be with those children and know the children and understand the children. And of course, like you said just now, know yourself, because it's only in knowing yourself, I guess, that you're going to know the needs of the child. But to be able to pull that thread through from little all the way through to when you're dealing with adults and you're working with the adults and trying to mold, or I don't know what the word is, to take this adult and help them understand this philosophy that's so deep and takes a lifetime to learn. You know, I think that's something that came across as well in the panel, was that it's not something you learn and you can tick the box and say, I've done it. It just it's relentless. It doesn't stop. You're learning all the time. And anyone going into Montessori needs to be prepared for that, because I guess that's why we're all here tonight.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm struck by what the both of you are saying is so similar from such different perspectives. It's almost like Hannah's talking about the structural elements of education, and Heidi is talking about that spiritual path that we all take through those structures. And I don't think that those can be separated, really. I think we need to understand that that spiritual path that we all take from the moment we're conceived, the moment we're born, all the way through our lives, happens through social structures. It doesn't just happen. It happens through these social structures, and the way we interact with these social structures is going to shape us and is going to shape the adults that we become. So I want to reiterate that it takes time. And what Heidi said about this being a lifelong journey, I mean, I was personally blessed to grow up inside a family that has these values. And when I stepped into the Montessori world, you know, Paula Glasgow is here again. Hi, Paula, who was one of my early mentors in, I consider you a mentor, Paula. I hope that's okay. Was one of my early mentors, and she's still here, still learning. And I know that she was also a mentor to Barbara. And Barbara is still here and still learning. And so these are not things that ever end. It's an ongoing process. So the three questions that we've been asked to consider today: what do we mean by the prepared adult? What role does examining our biases play as part of the spiritual preparation of the Montessori adult? And how can we create learning spaces for adults that really celebrate the diversity of the world in which we live? Now, I could actually do like a full 3-month course on each of these questions. So to sum up in just a few minutes, I think the key for me is that all of them come back to the personal transformation of the adult, and how does that actually happen? So the first question, what do we mean by a prepared adult? I think this is really crucial, because the prepared adult is not, and I repeat, is not the adult who knows all the Montessori lessons. The adult who knows all the Montessori lessons is a technician. They are technically proficient in these skills. The prepared adult has, and I'm going to go back to that word that I used last week, it's a vital responsiveness. That's what the prepared adult can do. The prepared adult has this vital responsiveness where we are immersed in this relational situation with the environment and the children, within which we respond to the needs of the children. You know, Heidi, in the panel, you said something that also really stuck with me, which is that we need our spirits to be right to reach out to other spirits. That's the prepared adult. It's the right spirit. It is approaching life with inquisitiveness and with awe, and looking at the mystery of the child and going, wow, that's something I want to be a part of. And you know, what Phil said is the core of cosmic education. We need to have this worldview of everything interrelated and interconnected. That's what it means to be a prepared adult. And again, prepared adult is not an outcome. It's a process. We are always preparing ourselves. There is no end to the preparation of the adult. Yeah, Marvin, hi, it's nice to see you here too, another panelist from Montessori Everywhere. And yes, what we are doing right now is preparation. When you go into your breakout rooms and you talk to each other and you are open to hearing from each other, the preparation of the adult does not happen in isolation. It cannot happen in isolation. And Dr. Montessori actually does say that too. She says we have to be open to feedback. We have to be open to feedback because examining our own biases, so I'm going to jump into the biases part now. Examining our own biases is a complex process of both introspection and reflection from the outside. Because we cannot possibly be aware of all the biases we hold, nor can we change our behavior simply based on introspection. So I heard a really good example actually the other day from a transgender activist who said, you know, our noses are so sensitive, and when we know that something is going to be, maybe, you know, we're questioning whether or not the milk has gone off, the first thing we're going to do is smell it. So that's what we use to tell when something is off, but we can't smell our own breath unless we really try. And so we depend on other people for that information. It's the same thing with all of our biases. We can be acting on biases without even knowing it until we hear back that something we've done has been harmful. And this happens in, you know, situations of gender, in situations of race, in situations of all kinds of identifiable groups and discrimination and prejudice against them. And it also happens in the classroom. And this is where that responsiveness piece really comes in. My very first teaching job as a lead in a classroom, a child had taken the landforms and had taken some plastic animals from somewhere else. And all of a sudden, the animals were diving and swimming and splashing, and straight out of training. And in that technician mindset, I took the materials away from that child. And lucky for me, the principal was there. And she came to me after and she said, "Did you even look at his face when you did that?" Because when I took those materials away, that child's face fell. And I had unknowingly, and with the best intentions, caused a child pain in that moment. So being open to that feedback is so crucial. And that is an essential element of both this question and the following question, which is how do we create spaces where everybody is welcome? The first step to that is what Dr. Montessori called that friendly attitude towards error, right? We all make mistakes in all our work, no matter what work it is that we're talking about. And if we can be okay with that, then we can grow. But if we take every piece of feedback, every mistake we make, and we build up our defenses around it, those defenses are what's going to stop us from being responsive. Those defenses act like a wall between ourselves, our environment, the children with whom we are in relationship. So our job is to take that feedback, to take a breath, to integrate it. And I am really excited. Barbara and Wendelin just told me today that they want me to come back sometime next year and do a full observation workshop. Because when I think about the transformation of the adult, I think about observation. And the reason I think about observation is not, it's a little bit different because I don't see observation in the way that most people see it, even within Montessori. When I talk about observation, I'm talking about transformative observation. And there are several of you who have done observation workshops with me here before, so you'll know what I'm talking about. Observation as a process for transformation is very much about being able to see more objectively what is around us by recognizing what is inside of us. So it's this idea that if I can start to see my responses and understand where my responses are coming from, then I can be more open and see more clearly what is actually going on. So come back next year and I'll give you some tips and tools to do that. But for me, that is the very basis of this work. Also for me, there is absolutely no separation between what we call anti-racist work or anti-hate work or anti-oppression work and the spiritual preparation of the teacher. Because the spiritual preparation of the teacher is liberatory work. It is about ridding ourselves of all our biases, right? And so as we rid ourselves of all our biases and we start to see things more clearly, we're going to see those structures of oppression more clearly. And we're going to see where those holes are. And then that's where we have to take the action. That's where the responsiveness comes back in. So I've given you a lot to think about in these couple of minutes, and I hope it wasn't terribly overwhelming. Reflect. And as you reflect, think about what I just said and think about what happened and how you responded to it. One of the things that kept on coming up was about inquisitiveness, about asking instead of telling. This especially came up around the conversations around diversity. What do we do when the children ask us difficult questions? Well, what do we do when they ask us difficult questions about math? We ask them right back, right? When they come to you and they ask you, did I do this right? Do you not ask them back? Well, show me what you think you did wrong. When they come to me, having trouble zipping up their zipper, I ask them, where are you stuck? So we need to take this same attitude towards these conversations that we think are difficult, because let me tell you, they are not difficult for the children. They are not difficult for the children. The children want to have these conversations. They're going to have them anyway. So when we ask, instead of giving them answers, we allow them to explore and make discoveries just like we do in the rest of our lives with them. So accepting their questioning, being open to it. And this is something that comes up again and again and again in anti-oppression work and also in the spiritual preparation of the teacher, is that we are going to come up against uncomfortable things. And so being comfortable with discomfort is really crucial to this process of self-transformation. Because part of transforming yourself means looking at the things that are not great about ourselves and then actually doing what we can to change them. So there's going to be discomfort, and that's okay. So there was also a lot of beautiful conversation, and I see a lot of beautiful comments about interconnectedness. And, awareness that somebody said teaching and learning is one word, that teaching and learning should always be one word, that they cannot be separated. And I love that, because learning and teaching cannot be separated. at the same level, we cannot be separated from different aspects of ourselves. We have to remember, I can't remember who said this one, but that we are whole humans ourselves, right? We're nurturing the whole child. We need to nurture our whole adult self. And a beautiful way to do that is through community. And this word kept on coming up as well, and I'm seeing it many times in the chat. Community, collaboration, co-creation. Tammy, that was you. I know that was you. That's usually the word I use when I'm talking about observation. It is an act of co-creation. Our work in Montessori is relational. It is co-creative. We are helping the children create themselves. They are helping us create ourselves if we let them. And that's the difference between the adult and the child. The child is in a process of self-creation that is not aware. They're just doing it because that's what children do. Adults can be very resistant to self-creation. And so we actually have to work at it. But if we are open to it, and again, back to that openness and that willingness to be uncomfortable, we can engage in the child in a co-creative sense. We can let them teach us how to be ourselves. And especially when we come back to that question of diversity, and those difficult questions that they sometimes ask, we can learn so much from them, from just listening to them. Just listening. Another thing that came up a couple of times was our own behavior. You know, how many of us are constantly aware of our own behavior and how our behavior impacts the environment? We all know, you know, that we're supposed to ask the children not to scream across the room, but how many of us scream across the room and then wonder why the children scream across the room? And we know this, right? We know this intellectually, but actually changing that behavior is so much harder than just saying, I will no longer scream across the room. Just like it's hard for the children and they need repetition, we need repetition and we need feedback. So Blanca was talking about how in her spaces, she makes sure, she puts a lot of effort into making sure that the teachers have a space for community, that the teachers have a space to give each other feedback. She has teachers observe in each other's classrooms, and I know Regina does this also, or did do this. So you have teachers across levels observing in each other's classrooms. So not only CASA teachers observing CASA teachers to learn how to be better CASA teachers, but CASA teachers observing elementary teachers, and elementary teachers observing toddler teachers. Because not only does that give you a better idea of the child and the journey of the child, it also lets you see other adults in action, and it then allows the adults in your room to give you feedback on what they saw. So it's this wonderful way of just creating this, again, co-creative community within the adults of a school. And when we have a co-creative atmosphere in a school, then all of the adults who are willing, again, adult transformation requires willingness, then all of the adults who are willing can engage in that process. And when we engage in that process, we come to understand each other better. And when we come to understand each other better, we are more accepting of the whole human. And the whole human includes all of the identities and complexities that all of us carry with us. And another thing that Blanca does in her school is that she makes space for the teachers to talk in groups over lunch, over food. Adults, food, sharing, it's just, you know, that's when we become more of ourselves, when we show even more of who we are. There is so much culture in food, right? And I happen to know that Blanca School is incredibly culturally diverse. And so I can just imagine the meals and the conversations at that table with the variety of different tastes and smells and sounds. But if as adults, if as leaders in school communities or training centers or whatever, we can make room for that building of community within adult settings, then we'll see a flourishing that is not possible if we're all stuck in our classrooms. And that goes right back to the idea that we're not separate. We're all interconnected. So it all comes right back together. And isn't it wonderful? Because that's just a beautiful illustration of how everything is interconnected. And I am really happy to hear so many people talk about the humility that it takes to do this work and to be a Montessori teacher. And we know that Dr. Montessori called on us so strongly to be humble. Because when we're not humble, we can't learn. So that humility is so incredibly crucial. And finally, I am so happy to hear all this talk about community, because the next webinar we're going to do is on the community panel. And so we're going to dig a lot more into what community means in a Montessori sense. And I am super excited for that one too. So last thought, I was really pleased to see so many of you talking about observation and what observation means, and how observation does not necessarily mean sitting down in a chair, writing down what you're seeing, or checking off check boxes. Because observation, when you engage in a transformative way, happens constantly. It's very much like mindfulness in that sense. You can go through your life as a transformative observer if you are willing to do so. So thank you all so much for helping me with my own preparation, because this was transformative for me. And I hope it was for all of you. And that's it for me. Back to you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Andy. Difficult to say more than to invite you to engage in the process of transformation, reflecting tonight and tomorrow, and sharing your reflections, and hoping that you are working within teams which give you the luxury of this transformative process and give you the support that you will need, because the transformative process is not easy, because we all have our little biases or big biases depending on what haunts us at any one time. We are not perfect, but we are all on a journey trying to understand ourselves and children better. So enjoy that journey until we meet again on the 8th of December to explore what community really means in the Montessori context. See you then. Thank you everybody for participating.